I tracked 2,500 cannonballs fired by 10 Sea of Thieves players over 5 matches each, just to see what I could learn. I found players ranging from level 150 to 12,000, and everywhere in between, just to see what differences we could see. I tracked their accuracy at different ranges, chain shots hit, and amount of 1-balls. This isn't the only thing needed to be a good cannoneer, since you could be lacking in this area but make up for it in shots fired per minute, good communication, crossbow sniping, TDM, general game sense, and having a good mental. Also, each player only had a sample of 5 games taken from each of them, so results could vary depending on strength of the opponent, or just how they were firing that day. Lastly, before we get into it, just because somebody is lower on this list doesn't mean any hate should go their way. Everybody has a different skill set when it comes to this game, and some may take it more seriously than others. 6 out of the 10 people I looked at are over level 1,300, so it's pretty stiff competition overall, especially if you're comparing a level 150 or 200 to them, so just get those guys some slack. The 10 players I chose from this, in order from lowest level to highest, is Tabs A at level 150. She's mostly a helm, but will fill in on cannons when her duo goes to board, or they occasionally swap roles mid-fight, depending on who's needed to where. She has pretty good synergy with her duo, so they can change roles on a dime and it doesn't really matter too much. Second is Tab's duo. I'm a Shork. He is level 180 and mains cannon. He's a wholesome gamer dad who mostly plays adventure and likes to talk on people, but he is able to hang in there with some solid players when it comes to cannons. Third is Heatmaster at level 200. I found him just by searching for Sloop HG on Twitch when trying to find more people at a lower level. He's a younger kid who probably has no idea that I'm watching his games, but for his age, he's pretty cracked at TDM, and he sank Skelly Curse IRL in one of his matches that I watched. I guarantee he's going to be a certified sweat lord in a few years. Fourth, we jump up to 725 with Pine Shells. He's a Sea of Thieves stream team member who beat me the one time that we fought against each other solo. It was a 15-minute fight, we were both demasted. I was almost out of supplies, so I raised my mast to try and circle him, but he broke my wheel and forced me to nose, which ultimately took me out. He's a very solid all-around cannoneer that is not afraid to board people. Fifth is probably our most well-known pirate on the list and our first of 4 SOP partners. Toxie Sinclair at level 1,350. She is known for being a gold ghost with interesting adventure YouTube videos, oftentimes finding unique ways to play the game, such as doing Hourglass on the Black Pearl. YouTube has slowed down a bit lately, but she's pretty consistent with Twitch and has proclaimed that she does love Hourglass. You can see that she has improved a lot since starting her Hourglass grind, and is proof that this is one of the best ways to improve in the game. Sixth is T-Kemp, a quickly rising Hourglass sweat who just started streaming this year and has been popping off while doing it. He's already level 1,400, and at this point this is when you start to see some of the top level cannoneer plays. He constantly reloads the sniper and cannon at the same time when needed, has crazy TDM and crossbow snipes. He is very consistent at hitting chains at medium to long range. The 7th is my homie, Doug Sluggins, at level 1,500. He's probably one of the biggest gamers on this list and has been streaming a variety of games consistently since 2018. I met him through playing solo Hourglass, and he reached out to duo after we had multiple matches that always ended with us both demasted, fighting for that 1-ball or snipe to win the game. When facing him, it's always difficult to even get on my cannon without him knocking me off of it. 8th is our next big level jump, up to level 6,400 with Push and Wood. He is well known in the Hourglass community and started streaming Sea of Thieves right before Hourglass was released. Since then, he has 10x'd his viewership and is continuing to grow. I have yet to come across him in game, but I've heard some stories about those who have, and you can tell they fear him. 9th is Nessie Does at level 10,300. He's an Australian SOP partner who you will see either ramming sloops in Hourglass these days, just going for a TDM, trying to get a quick win, or playing with Sponge against other crazy sweaty crews in fights that last 30 minutes. These fights often end with both crews demasted, constantly trying to shoot themselves over and win the difficult 2v1 to confirm the sync. Last but not least is our highest level cannoneer, IDBZ, at level 12,000. He is the most feared name on NA servers and is crazy enough to be the first one to obtain the Avatar Reaper's Revenge title. The one time I ran into him was on Brig Hourglass. During the opening broadside, they 1-balled my MC, so our flex went to revive him, and then our flex got 1-balled. So I ran to lower the front sail and try and reset the fight, give my team time to come back, but then I got one-balled as well. While we were on the ferry, his teammate, fat tall guy, deck shot onto our ship, and it was basically just GG by that point. Alright, now that we know the cannoneers, we're going to look at some of the data, and then see what conclusions we can make from it at the end. Starting first, we have the total hit rate for each player. This ranges from 36% all the way up to 69%. This data doesn't tell the whole story because of the different shots fired by each player. For example, Pushing Wood had 30% of his shots coming from close range, since he had some pretty dominant games where they quickly demasted his opponents and then just started circling them for easy shots. Also, 49% of Nessie's shots happened while both ships were demasted. These shots are generally harder than close range shots, but easier than mid-range, because you don't have to adjust for any lead. However, you can still see a big difference from the top level players compared to those just starting out in Hourglass. When we look at close range shots, these are usually when one ship is circling another ship that's demasted or anchored. DB jumps to first with a 92% hit rate. But even newer players were hitting most of their shots at this range. In fact, Shork is up to third in this category despite being the second lowest level player that I looked at. This shows that if you feel like you are better than your opponent, you should try to fight at longer ranges where you have more of an advantage. And if you're a newer player, you should try to force close fights to even the odds against stronger crews, because you're going to have a much easier time hitting your shots at this range. Mid hit rate is when we start to see a big difference between players. This is usually when both ships are circling each other, neither of them demasted, and firing fairly easy shots but not right up next to each other. Most players will hover around that 50% mark when both ships are circling, but then you can run into players like DB or Pushing Wood at 65% or 80%. These guys are going to be slamming you off of the cannon line, making it difficult to even fire back. Between all players, this is where the largest portion of shots were coming from, at 32%. So if you're trying to improve, these are the shots that I would probably practice the most. Once you have mid-range shots down, then you can work on long ranges. This is where you see some crazy separation between really solid level 1000 players and players with multiple thousands of levels. Most good players can expect to be around 20% hit during the opening broad, and I classified long shots as when they're usually firing above their crow's nest or so. But at the top level, you can expect them to hit around 35 to 40% of these shots. These shots are going to give these players a huge early lead, possibly causing the helm to start bilging earlier or lose angle due to breaking their wheel. They may even get a crack on the mast, thus requiring them only to hit one chain shot once they get to mid-range. Next, we can look at the chain shot hit rate. This one's a little bit more interesting because of when players decide to use the chains, not necessarily how many they hit. Most players seem to start firing them when they felt like they could hit them at about a 50% rate, but that means players like DB and Nessie are more willing to fire them at mid to long range compared to others that are firing them at mid to close range. Other times, they would fire them when they have to, such as when both ships are demasted and the enemy ship is trying to get back moving again. This category also has a fairly low sample size, which can make the data difficult to track, since I only saw one game where more than 10 chain shots were used. However, knocking their mast first is one of the best advantages you can get in Hourglass. So, if your accuracy isn't the greatest with them, you're going to want to stock up more before a fight so you can fire them at will until you get the demast. Being conservative, you can expect to demast somebody with 5 to 10 shots as an average player, so you should have at least that amount going into a fight. A lot of players I see will go into Hourglass with just basic supplies, and the 4 chains that it gives you are not enough. Just a quick tip, for solo Hourglass, what I've been doing when I start is I grab the 4 chains for my ship, find one more from the outpost, scuttle to a new sea to get to a new outpost, and then I'll have another 4 guaranteed chains already in my ship. That way I have a minimum of 9 going into the next fight, plus whatever else I can find on the outpost. Again, if you're newer, focusing on hitting your chains will give you a much better chance of winning, because then you can take the fight at close range, where your cannon accuracy will be much more even with these other more skilled players. One of the best things you can do if you do get demasted is to try and demast the other crew back, so they can't circle you and open both sides of your ship for that win condition. Once you are in this position with both ships demasted, cannons are a little bit easier to hit, but it does have some of its own challenges. You don't have to lead your shots, but you have to adjust for the waves, knock the other player off of their cannon, go for spread, go for one balls, and help your boarder make it aboard safely by hitting top decks or shooting them over with a deck shot. When looking at the both demasted accuracy, you'll see that 2 players didn't take any shots in this fight state, and the third player, Tabs, only took 6 shots. This shows that players that are lower level either don't focus chains enough when they are demasted to make it an even fight, they struggle hitting these chains, or they let their opponent get their mast back up too quickly and struggle locking in a death spiral and keeping them off the mast after they do get them demasted. The accuracy stats here also don't take range into consideration, but most of the time in these double demasted fights, it's somewhere in between close and medium range. So some players may have had easier shots than others in this category. Moving on, one of the best ways to win a fight is by hitting a one ball on the enemy. This puts huge pressure on them, and they can either risk going for a res, and then if they die, it's game over, or be a man down for 30 seconds. Surprisingly, Nessie didn't hit any one balls in the games I watched, but that could be due to him fighting some pretty high level players in the games I saw. These players are more observant and are pretty good at dodging one balls. This may also explain how Shork and Heatmaster have a high one ball rate due to them fighting easier crews that don't dodge as well. DB and Pushin' Wood have the highest rate because they're not only accurate, but they're precise. They aren't just trying to hit the ship wherever they can, they're actively hitting it where they want to. Finally, we can look at their accuracy compared to the difficulty of their shots. I gave each different shot type a different difficulty score, with mid-ranges being a difficulty of 1 as my baseline. This meant long range had a difficulty of 2, since their average accuracy was about half when players were going for these shots. I gave close range shots a value of 0.65 because they're easier to hit, and so on for chains and both demasted. This can now show us a graph plotting the difficulty on the x-axis and their hit rate on the y-axis. This again shows that Nessie had the best hit rate overall, but is also tied with the easiest shots of the bunch. However, he still did hit these shots at a much higher rate than those with a similar difficulty. It also shows that T-Kemp, Pushin' Wood, and DB were more willing to fire shots at longer ranges due to them being more confident hitting them. I can then take their accuracy and multiply it by their difficulty value to get an adjusted cannon score. This score isn't necessarily a percent of cannons hit or anything like that, but you can think of it like the NBA. Steph Curry was ranked 280th this season in shooting percentage overall, but that's because he's more likely to take difficult shots. Looking at his true shooting percentage, which gives more value to three-point shots and some value to free throws, he was ranked 29th overall, which is a much more accurate representation of his shooting ability. While long-range shots in Hourglass don't result in more points like in the NBA, there are still benefits of being able to be more accurate at longer ranges. Whether that's getting more pressure first, more likely to demask them, or just hitting a lucky one ball. This is the ranking that I find suits the best overall skill of each player, at least during the small amount of games that I watch. Again, this isn't the end-all be-all of what makes a good cannoneer, but it does show the difference between what some of the top players in this game are doing compared to those just starting out. It also shows that one of the most important factors in improving at this game is just time spent playing. Hourglass levels aren't one-to-one in terms of skill, but there's a good correlation. So, in the end, what did we learn? Just because somebody has a gold curse doesn't mean that you can't keep up with them. Practice your mid-range and chain shots, try to hit a lucky one ball, and you can still win. But the biggest reason these players have an advantage over you is because they've put their reps in, firing hundreds of thousands of cannons. Accuracy isn't the only determining factor in winning a fight, but if you can hit your chains before the other crew, then you've got a great chance to win. If you are chained, try to chain them back to even the fight, and fight at ranges suitable for your skill level. If you're newer, bring the fights in close where the better crews won't have a huge advantage over you. Or hell, even go for a parallel fight instead of circling. Not having to lead your shots can also flatten that accuracy skill curve against good crews. The last thing I'll say is have a good mental when it comes to Hourglass. DB might have won a lot more fights than you, but he's also lost a lot more. If he didn't have a positive mentality to push through these losses and raged after every single one of them, he wouldn't be where he's at today. That's all from me. If you learned anything new, or if you dislike Sea of Thieves, data, or speedrunning, feel free to give me a follow here or over on my Twitch. That's it. Peace out.